we had in the Gemara and Baruchos and Shulchan Aruch that 4 people are obligated to acknowledge and give thanks to Hashem for certain events that took place in their life, attributed to not a natural event, but it was semi-miraculous. And they have to offer their acknowledgement of that thanks by bringing a shlomim, a peace offering, which is accompanied with 40 loaves of bread. 40 loaves. 30 of the loaves are made of matzah. They're not permitted to become chametz. 10 of those loaves are chametz. The loaves themselves are the equivalent of a meal offering. We never find anything made of wheat in the Beis HaMikdash being chametz, only 2 instances. On Shavuos, the shtei alechem, the 2 loaves of bread which accompany the communal offering, which is brought on Shavuos, it's wheat grain, which is chametz. The wheat grain which they use for the shtei alechem, the 2 loaves that accompany the korban tzibur, it's referred to kisi atzeres, the sheep that are brought for Shavuos. Those 2 loaves are made of chametz. That grain is the new grain that was first cut after Pesach, but you're not permitted to use the new grain in the Beis HaMikdash until the shtei alechem, the 2 loaves are brought of that new grain. Meaning, on Pesach, we bring the korban omer, the barley offering, on the 2nd day of Pesach. That allows the commoner to eat the new grain, whether it's wheat, any of the grains. However, the new grain to be used in the Beis HaMikdash, the first time it's used is when they bring these 2 loaves of bread. It's called the shtei alechem. The shtei alechem, although it's wheat, and wheat is always, or whether it's barley, is never chametz, the shtei alechem are brought from chametz. It's leavened. So we have the shtei alechem, which is leavened, and we have 10 of the 40 loaves of bread, which are brought together with the peace offering as a thanks offering, are chametz. Question is, why in these 2 instances is it chametz, where under normal circumstance the Torah does not allow it to be chametz? By a meal offering we had in the Parshas Vayikra, that even after you take the palmful of a regular mincha and you sacrifice it, what's left for the Kohanim to eat, they're not permitted to allow what's left to become chametz. It always has to be in a state of matzah, never to become leavened. So again, why in these 2 instances does the Torah say it must be chametz? So let's talk about first the Todah offering. The Mishnah tells us, Arba chayivim lahodis. The 4 people have to give acknowledgement, thanks to God, that they're alive. Who are they? Holchem Yidborios, a person who traverses the desert and he comes out alive. Holche Yamim, a person who travels the high seas and he comes back alive. Cholesh Nisrape, a person was ill, serious illness, and he recovered from the illness. And Chovish, Abisha Chovish Beis Asur, a person was imprisoned and he came out alive. These are the 4 individuals who have to give thanks to Hashem for they're the beneficiaries of Hashem's kindness. Miraculous. They're alive. Why over there that must be chametz? The 10 of the 40 loaves. So the Sephardo explains, why does one have to merit a miracle to be alive? If a person is sin-free and there's no claim against him, there's no reason for him to need special protection. The only person who needs special protection is because there is a basis for prosecution, and the person has a certain degree of culpability, and despite that culpability, Hashem intervenes and doesn't allow that person to be compromised and to die. So therefore, we know in Chazal, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is always depicted and compared to Seor Shabisa. That's the yeast in the dough. The yeast in the dough means what causes the dough to ferment and to be tasty, which represents desire, and to rise, which is the characteristic of arrogance, haughtiness. So the yeast in the dough, the Yetzer Hara is always identifies as the Sor Shabisa, as the yeast in the dough. So it's only, therefore, the 10 loaves represent the reason why a person has to give thanks to Hashem. The vast majority is matzah, 30 of the 40, but 10 is the reason why, that's the representation of why actually it's considered miraculous that he's alive, because due to his level of culpability, maybe he shouldn't have survived these various ordeals. Despite that, Hashem's overwhelming chesed allowed him to be alive. Therefore, Arba Chayovim Lohodus. These 4 people have to give thanks and acknowledgement to Hashem that they're alive. This is how the Sefarno explains it. It's based on the concept of there's no perfect tzaddik. So if there's no perfect tzaddik, everybody has some level of liability. Therefore, you have to bring 10 of the 40 chametz representing the Yetzer Hara. This is the Sefarno. He also says something interesting. Normally, all kochim kalim, all levels of consecration from the Mizbeach, which are the lesser level of consecration, are eaten usually 2 days and a night. Only after 2 days and a night, then you're no longer permitted to eat it. It's only kochi kadoshim, it's only the more advanced level of consecration, such as the chatos, the sin offering, the osham, the guilt offering, and the ola, which has to be the burnt offering. It's only a day and a night. Once dawn comes, that korban has to be burnt, destroyed through burning. Why over here, despite the fact that it's kochim kalim, it's the lesser classification of kochim, of consecration, it has to be eaten a day and a night, just as kochi kadoshim. So again, there's a famous Sefarno, because if a person, there's a Torah violation, we're not permitted to allow anything consecrated for the Mizbeach to be considered leftover to burn it. It's a negative commandment. So therefore, one has to do whatever he can to make sure it's consumed within that period of time. Toda, where you're giving thanks to Hashem, we want the person to invite as many people as possible, to publicize the miracle, because since the person has less time to eat it, more people have to be invited. So there's what he refers to, Pirsum Hanes. There's a publicizing of the miracle. Therefore, despite the fact that it's Kochim Kalim, that it's lesser level of consecration, the period of time is a lesser period because it wants to make this public knowledge that the person is giving thanks to God that he's alive. In these 4 instances. That's the Sefarno. But again, what about the Shtei Alechem? What about the 2 loaves of bread, which are of the new grain, wheat grain, which are brought on Shavuos? Why they chametz? That he doesn't discuss. So this is what I was thinking. It addresses everything. When a person says, thank you, when you acknowledge you're a beneficiary of God's kindness or goodness, or when you acknowledge that you're a beneficiary of anybody's goodness or kindness, what is that acknowledgement? You're acknowledging that you're a beneficiary of someone else's goodness. As a result of that, what does that cause you to become? You become indebted. There's an indebtedness of the recipient to whoever, the benefactor, whoever provided whatever that service or that gift was to that person. You become a debtor. Shlomo Melech tells us in Mishlei, Eved lo v'lishmalveh, that when a person lends money to a third party, the borrower is considered an Eved. There's an indebtedness like an Eved. You're enslaved. There are many halachic ramifications of that. That you're beholden to the lender, not to pay interest, but there's a beholdenness to the lender. A human being does not want to be indebted. A person tries to evade that. So if a person experiences something where he's a beneficiary of a third party's goodness or kindness, what normally happens? In most situations, or very often, if the person somehow could evade classification, to see it that he's not a beneficiary of someone else, he prefers to do that because as a result of seeing it in that context, he's not a debtor or he's less of a debtor. I'll give you an example. A person works for a company and he gets an exceptional bonus. So the person could process in saying that since I'm a beneficiary of that bonus, they gave me the bonus, I'm beholden to the company. As much as I give my service to the company, and I understand the reason why they gave me the bonus is because I have great value, but nevertheless, I'm still appreciative that they gave it. That person feels indebted to the company, and he will do more of the same, be committed to succeed for the company. Another person would say, I owe the company nothing. The only reason why they gave me the bonus is because of my exceptional value to the company. But if I would not have that value to the company, they'd give me nothing, or they give me less of a bonus. A person tries to minimize the level of indebtedness because the more you're indebted, the more you're beholden. That's the nature of a person. Usually, there's a rule of thumb that a person who could acknowledge that he's a full beneficiary of someone else's service or kindness, it's an indication of he's a quality person. He has no problem recognizing that he is a beneficiary of someone else. But very often people, as we say, have short memories. It's not they have short memories because initially, when they are recipients of someone else's service or kindness, immediately the way they put it in a context or the way they put the spin on it, it's they did it for themselves, they didn't do it for me. He needs a favor, therefore he gave me the gift. He treats me this way because he should be treated this way. That's the natural tendency of a human being, trying to shirk that responsibility of indebtedness. The four individuals have to give thanks to Hashem. As we said, the one who traverses the desert, the one who travels the high seas, the one who recovers from a serious illness, the one who's released from prison. Every one of the situations, you have to bring a korban todah. Thank you means acknowledging I am a beneficiary of Hashem's kindness, Hashem's chesed. But factually speaking, we deal with statistics. The statistics are that a person who travels the high seas, let's say most people do come back alive. People who traverse the desert, most people at the end of the day return alive. People recover from illnesses. We're not talking about a minority of people or a person that has that special doctor who he has a very good track record in this area that his patients recover, or he comes out of prison alive. So over here, there's a little bit of a struggle. Do I put it within the context of statistic, or do I say the statistic of every one of these instances, the statistic is that every one of these people who are alive, God wanted them to be alive. That's the question, how to process it. Every person who returns from the high seas, from traversing the desert, each person himself, individually, he's alive because it's Chesed Hashem. Because God provided that kindness to him that he's alive. So therefore, so what is the struggle? To acknowledge Hashem provided that gift, there's indebtedness. Otherwise, there's no indebtedness. If I attribute it to statistic. So what exactly is that struggle? What is it rooted in? What is the basis? You know what the basis is? It's called the Yetzer Hara. It's called the Sosha B'Isa. Therefore, when the person brings the Todah offering, what actually the Torah is saying, despite the fact that the Yetzer Hara, that evil inclination, would have wanted you to process it and attribute it to statistic, rather than to that you're individualized and you're a beneficiary of Hashem's kindness, the person saw it right. Therefore, 10 of the 40 loaves of bread, a chametz rather than matzah for that reason. Because it's an acknowledgement, despite that a person has that inclination, he saw it right. That's that understanding. Now, the shtei alechem, the 2 loaves of bread, which are brought together with the korban tzibur, with the communal offering on Shavuos, why they chametz? Now, there's a famous word from the Maral of Prague that the korban omer that's brought on the second day of Pesach is made of barley flour. It's not chametz. The shtei alechem is wheat flour of the new grain, which is chametz. So Maral asks why. We only find the only time there's a meal offering that's brought from barley flour is a woman who's a suspected adulteress. She has to bring a minchas kenos, a meal offering of a sota, which is barley. So the Mishnah tells us in sota, why? Because he also masa behemo, since she was forewarned by her husband not to seclude herself with another man. And she went and defied her husband's warning, and we don't know what happened behind those closed doors. She may have committed adultery, she may have not. But even if she did not, the behavior is totally unacceptable. It's the behavior of an animal. See, he also masa behemo, since she behaved like an animal without any level of responsibility or commitment to that exclusive relationship, therefore the grain which she brings, that meal offering, is machol behemo. It's animal fodder. The majority of the food which is given to animals is barley. So that's to connote her behavior. When we left Egypt, at what level are we spiritually speaking? We were Memta Shari Tuma, on the 49th level of spiritual impurity. In terms of what we were supposed to be, we were supposed to be spiritualized at a special level. Atem Kriyim Odom. But at what level when we left Egypt? We were Behema. We were the level of we were totally devoid of spirituality, like an animal. Therefore, so to connote that status at that moment, the ingredients of the meal offering is barley, which is machol behema, which is animal fodder. When we came to Shavuos, which we reached the pinnacle of our spirituality, the Gemara tells us in Hurrius, what is wheat grain? The main consumption of wheat grain is consumed by a human being, not by animal. As a result of that, to connote the level that we reached, the level of Odom, Atem Kriyim Odom, that we reached that special level of Odom, of the human being, what the human being is supposed to be, therefore the grain is wheat rather than barley. This is the Maral of Prague. So I asked the question, but based on this, that we reached the pinnacle of our spirituality, which is connoted through the grain, if that's the case, if we're holding Memta Shari Tara, the 14th level of purity, why is it Chometz? Chometz itself represents the evil inclination. Why is it Chometz? So what we had said in the past was that regardless of what level you reach, even the ultimate level, a person always has to remember, being a descendant of Odom, we still have that microscopic cell called the Yetzer Hara. And if a person has, and as though the person has to be cognizant that you're always vulnerable to his machinations, and he could actually topple you. So therefore, the Torah is making a statement. Despite the fact you reach the pinnacle of your spirituality, you always have to be aware that there's always Yetzer Hara, there's always the Satan. Therefore, there's always that representation of the leavened ingredient. Therefore, despite that, because a person one moment could go, as we see by Sinai, although we reached the level of Odom, what happened on the 40th day? Because Moshe, according to that calculation, was delayed. We got involved in the Egel. We already heard the 10 commandments. But despite that, they failed. So you see that even when you're at the pinnacle of your spirituality, you're still vulnerable to his attack and to his machinations.